that basically means turning your 2D design or even ideas that you have in your own mind into 3D objects. A 3D object like the ones I'm showing you in here is basically a representation of your designs in the 3D environment. It could be a character such as this one. It could be something like this one, which is, I think, inside some sort of platform. It could be like a very elaborate 3D character such as this one from Pirates of Caribbean. It could be a vehicle or anything like that. So we have to learn the techniques of making a 3D character or a 3D model or a 3D environment. Once you put all of these together, we call it a 3D model. Of course, beyond the tools that we use in places such as Maya, there are a lot of other technologies for making 3D model as well. A lot of it has to do with, for instance, 3D scanning, which, does anyone know what is 3D scanning? Or what do you think it means? Yes, it's some sort of a camera that takes so many different photographs of an object, a real life object such as a human, and then puts them all together to convert it into a 3D model. The one I'm showing you in my screen right now, this is one of the more advanced ones. There are 3D scanners these days on iPhones and Androids, and they do a surprisingly good job. Like, you would actually be surprised how you can take a bunch of photos with your iPhone or your Android phone and then submit it to one of these cloud servers, and they actually get back to you with a 3D model, a lot of times for free, which is really great. Beyond using 3D scanning for modeling, there is also photogrammetry, which is a technique. In here there's a picture of it. Is a technique of taking so many photos at once and then converting them into 3D models. Photogrammetry is being used in every field these days, primarily for video gaming and whatnot. There's also machine learning and AI that is used for 3D modeling. So there's a lot of different technologies for making models. All of them comes down to these bare basic stuff, which is basically the ability to create 3D models in 3D software, or at least the ability to take those models made in places such as 3D scanning or machine learning and modifying them. Once we got our models done and the models are ready, then we can head into something called rendering. Who knows what is 3D rendering, or these samples that I'm showing you? Let's find the vehicle so we can see that. What is 3D rendering? Yes, very well. It's basically going from these, which are models that are in 3D environment, such as these ones that they basically show you the model or the mesh, into these, which is the one that shows you like a photograph. That's the rendered version of those things. It gives it this right lighting, texturing, the effects, and the reflections and the refractions and whatnot, and the combination of all of them together, they basically become your final render. Now, between these two, there are so many other steps that they happen, like for instance animation. Now, when we talk about animation, we usually think about animations that happens at Pixar or places like that, but even a basic camera movement, that is animation. So if you have a rendering like this, an architectural visualization, and you make your camera move around it, that is called an animation. I know it's a very simple one, but that's still an animation. More complex animations are like the ones that we do for characters, and that's where you get a character and you animate it to give it some sort of a look of a real life situation, whether that is for, I don't know, purposes of a movie or anything like that, or a TV commercial or anything like that. Before doing that, for more advanced animations such as human animation and whatnot, there's a different step called rigging or a skeleton, which is basically preparing your models to be able to be animated. That is basically like making something like a skeleton of a human, putting it within your 3D character and making sure that your 3D character works based on the movement of your skeleton. Again, we'll get to all of these at some point in the future. The final step of making stuff in 3D software usually is something we call the particle systems, or 3D visual effects, which is basically making effects such as fire, smoke, like fluid simulation, which is a very popular field, and we do a lot of those these days, basically with software such as Maya or RealFlow or anything like that they simulate fluids basically. Now all of these things, once you do them in a 3D software, at the end we take it into a compositing software which puts everything together, and that becomes your final animation. So again, you're not really meant to learn any of these things right away. We're just going to get started with the basics of Maya, but I just want you to get a sense of the process. The process goes from having some ideas, some sketches, that we turn them into 3D models. The 3D models, we prepare them for rendering by doing anything such as shading or texturing or lighting or anything like that, so our models are ready for rendering. Then if we have characters, we rig those characters, we give them the right skeletons, then we animate those to convey whatever we are trying to say, whether the character is running or jumping or laughing or whatever. Once we are done with that, we render everything, we add the visual effects and simulations to them, and then at the end we add the compositing and we put everything together. We do color grading and color coding. Give it a second, guys, for the sirens to pass by my home. You know how it is in Vancouver, there's always a police car and ambulance passing by around somewhere, so I'm sorry for that. All right, now that they're gone, so that's basically the overall process that it goes through for an animation movie to be created. Now, depending on the complexity of your work, some of this might be skipped, some of this might be included. My recommendation is that as you go along thinking about your final projects and you're gonna start thinking about your teams or whatever, think about as small as you can, but as higher quality as you can. That should be the goal for you guys, to make something very, very small, but really high quality. If you want to think about it, if you want to make a 3D character, let me show you some characters, for instance. If you want to make a 3D character that is very basic, such as this kid, you can make 20 of these. But if you want to make a really complex 3D character, let's say this one that's a little bit more complex, or maybe this kid that's a little bit more complex. So you see there's more work that goes into them. So think of making a smaller projects, less characters, maybe even one, but having really, really better storytelling and really crafting your character to the maximum of your ability, and trying to tell better stories at higher quality. Think of it like this. If you have come to this course because you're thinking that I want to add that to my resume and I want to try to find jobs, think of someone who is going to look at your resume or your CV in 6 months or a year from now. They're going to probably spend a maximum of 30 seconds looking at your CV, skimming through and deciding whether they want to meet you or have a longer chat with you or not. So ask yourself, how can I utilize this course to have a few really stunning frames that I can add to my resume, and based on that people can actually enjoy my work. Like, these are some of the stuff that I have on my own resume from my previous work, which few frames would actually say what you can do, and this few frames would actually show the quality of the work and say that this person knows how to do, I don't know, fluid simulation, knows how to do really good rendering, really to do good effects or good VFX and stuff, knows how to do proper compositing. Just a few samples would cut the work for you. You don't really need to work on really large projects. What you do need to work on is simpler projects, smaller projects, but with higher quality, really good rendering quality, really good characters and whatnot. So even though that process is coming up, we still have some time for it. Keep that in mind, that your goal should be working on a smaller quantity of work, but really, really higher quality of stuff. And that's what I would really recommend to you. So that was in a nutshell the process of making stuff in 3D animation. And today we get started with Maya, working on the basics of modeling. And before we can even get to that, we have to get to learn our 3D software. We have to know how do we use our 3D software. And our 3D software obviously is Maya. Maya is the most prominent 3D tool out there. I have worked in almost all 3D software tool out there. They each have some strengths and some weaknesses. Maya's prominent strength is that its user interface is great, is designed for scalability. The learning curve at the beginning might seem a little bit complex, but once you get used to it, no other software beats Maya when it comes to the UI. I feel like the user interface and the process in the way that you work in Maya, it's really the greatest they could put together compared to all the other software out there. In any case, we're going to get started with Maya. And before that, I want to ask you, A, does anyone have any questions about the process or about the course or the class? And B, is there anyone who still doesn't have Maya on their computers? So am I to assume that you all have Maya installed so you can, tag along with me and you can work with me? Okay, I take that as a yes. I feel like you all have Maya. So is there any other questions before we get started with Maya? Is there anyone who wants to ask me anything about the course, about the process, about, what we do, or anything that kind of, even remotely relates to what we are trying to do in here? Okay, so I take it as you're all here with me, guys. This is a very different time for all of us, and I understand we're all working on at home. Some of you may not even be in Vancouver. The more you can be involved in the classes, it helps yourself and helps me and helps everybody else as well. Obviously, I leave that to you guys. You're all adults and mature students, but I leave it to you guys to try to be as involved as you can with the classes, so we can somehow get some resemblance of the on-site classes, because this whole online situation isn't as simple as the on-sites are. So I leave it to you guys to try to help us out in terms of making these classes a little bit more interactive. In any case, let's head into Maya, and I want to get started with using Maya and showing you guys how we actually use Maya. If you Sure, go for it, of course. That's actually a very good point and a very good question, and I don't really have a good answer for you because there really isn't a way in here. As of next week that we hopefully move to Zoom, there are ways for it to do it in there. But in here, don't be shy of interrupting me. I understand that we are online, and I know in theory, you don't want to interrupt someone else who's talking. I wouldn't want to interrupt you, but there is really no other way for us to do it right now. I'd rather be interrupted and make sure that your question is answered and you're following, as opposed to not getting there. I will make a point of asking you at the end of every few minutes of explanation that if anybody has a question, but if something was happening, just interrupt me. Don't worry about that. Yes, we are using that. The problem is that I actually had a chat with Steve about it as well. It makes it, to be honest, for me, it makes it very difficult to go back and forth between the screen I have and keeping an eye on the lab feed, because even right now I can see someone at 1240 has written that low stream resolution to get to get Discord Nitro. Yeah, but if I want to keep my eye on that and read those, it's gonna be just imagine if you were in the on-site class and I had to read your questions while I'm teaching. That would make it very, very difficult. I still encourage you to do it, but forgive me if I can't get to those right on time. So if there was something that was to do with the process of what I'm teaching you, feel free to chase me right then, so I can re-explain it, or I can tell you whatever is your question about it. Yeah, I guess that's a good idea. Yeah, absolutely. That notification pops in here, and I can see it, and I think I can hear the ding that comes in. But my bottom line is that if you were in an on-site class, you would raise your hand, or you would just say, "Hi, excuse me," or whatever. In here, it might feel like you're interrupting the other person. Don't worry about it. This is how it is. Unfortunately, the year 2020, Corona and everything. So we have to manage to be okay with that, and I'm perfectly fine with it. So if you felt that you want to ask something, just feel free to say, hey, stop here. I want to ask you a question, and I don't mind it at all. All right. Sure. I know. I know that came up in the previous group as well, and that's one of the main reasons I want to move into Zoom, because this whole not seeing my cursor is actually going to be very, very challenging with Maya. Like if I was teaching a programming course, it didn't really matter. But if you can't see my pointer in here, I actually have to, each time I have to actually explain what I am touching or tapping or whatever. So yeah, that's one of the reasons we're going to Zoom, and also I will make sure to explain what I'm doing. And if I forgot, please remind me. If I said, hey, I click here, and you didn't know what I mean when I say I click here, remind me so I can actually I mention it to you. Mm-hmm. I think that is what I had done. So I'm not sharing an application, I'm sharing the entirety of a screen. And here there is no option for anything to do with mouse. So again, this is now me going live, and I don't think you can see the pointer, can you? Yeah, so that's what I kind of expect. You actually have a point. I actually expected that when I share the screen, the entirety of the screen goes through, but apparently not. If any of you guys is, yeah, that's what we have done. I've shared the screen. This is my entire screen. That's why you can see Maya, and now you can see my background. It's not only the Maya window, but still it doesn't show the thing. So the pointer. Guys, don't worry about this so much. As of next week, we'll move on to Zoom. It's a lot more comfortable, and also it allows me to share at 1920 full HD resolution, which I think is important. This is at 720, is not the best idea. And for today, I will make sure I will keep explaining what am I doing, what am I pressing, why am I pressing something at a certain point. And hopefully it will make sense. And yeah, so as of next week we'll go to Zoom. So let's get started if everyone is ready and with me. So once you load up your Maya, you should see a window similar to the one that I have in here. These first few steps, I kind of want you to follow me blindly, because I want to get to somewhere, then I want to explain what we did and why we did things in a certain way. I just want to have some stuff before I get started with the work. So the first thing I want you to do is this. I want you to go up to the Create menu, Polygon Primitives. If this thing is on, interactive creation, I want you to turn it off. This is the very first thing. And I'm sorry, I know I'm jumping ahead of myself, but there are reasons for it, and you will soon see why am I doing this thing. So the first thing is create Polygon Primitives, get rid of the interactive creation. Guys, as we go along, and because I don't see your faces, I'm just going to assume that you are with me. If I go too fast, or if you don't manage to catch up, please let me know. I can't just guess that, because I neither have access to your screens, nor can I see it on your faces, or even to see whether you're done or not. So I'm just going to guess that things are done. I'm going to move forward. If not, you have to tell me. So the first thing was I went in here, I said Polygon Primitive, I don't want interactive creation. And then the next thing is I went up to here and I said, give me a create Polygon Primitive and make a cube for me. So that's the next thing I want to happen. And if you do that, you should see a polygon somewhere in the middle of your screen. And once we got to there, what I want to be doing is I actually want to select this tool on the left side, the one that on it is written a scale. I know you can't see my pointer, but you can see when I click on it. This is the last one in here. And if you can't get it like that, when my mouse pointer is the tooltip has opened up on it as well, you can press the R button. So R button would basically load up your scale. So if I'm here, I press R, it actually goes and loads up that tool over there, and that's the scale tool. And what I can do with it is I can actually grab in the middle and I can scale my object up. And that's what I want you to do. I want you to scale your cube up to a size similar to mine. It doesn't matter the specific numbers of it. Once everyone is up to here, then I want to show you how do we navigate our scene, which is the first thing I want to show you in Maya. So I'm going to make my Maya a little bit smaller. I'm going to put it somewhere in here. Let me get rid of all of those other objects over there. So this way I can actually open a text editor and I can, make some notes for you guys. So text edit. I'm going to make a text editor here on the side. So when we are dealing with Maya's navigation, we need to learn a few things. And here are the things that I want you guys to try. I want you to try Alt plus middle mouse drag. And then actually at the very beginning, Alt plus left mouse drag, middle mouse drag, and then Alt plus right mouse drag. If anybody is not using Windows, like me, you're using a Mac machine, instead of Alt, you obviously press the Options button. That is if you have a Mac machine. So try these three and tell me what does it do, or what did you understand from it? Guys, this font size, is this readable? Can someone confirm it for me? Should I make it larger or smaller? Okay. Okay, so what do these tools do? Can somebody explain to us? Which one? All of them, they do the same thing? Okay, anyone else? And what's the last one? The R. Okay, so let's write all of these together. Left mouse drag and Alt, this is basically what we call a tumble, or in other software you might hear it as they call it 3D orbit. So you basically do a 3D orbit around your object. You can rotate around your object. The correct term for it is tumble. That's why I want you to learn the right terminology for it. The next one, middle mouse drag, is this one that you call pan in some other software. In here we call track, which is basically tracking left and right, up and down. This is like holding the space button in Adobe Photoshop and clicking and dragging. It basically tracks your scene from one end to another. So if I have like multiple objects in here, don't worry about how am I making this. I can use this to just go from one side to another one. That is doing a track. And then finally, the RMD, the right mouse drag, does a dolly, which is basically gets you closer or further from an object. So here, closer or further. This isn't exactly zoom, because zoom is a different meaning. Zoom is when you actually change the way the camera works. That is basically changing the lens and the mode of the perspective. Dolly is when basically you go further away or closer to an object. That's like picking up your camera and walking closer to an object. So these three are the basics of navigation. So scene navigation, these are the very basics of it. What else can we do in terms of navigation? If we have an object, we can press the F button on it and that would frame it. Can we try this? And then if we have several objects, we can press the A button to frame all objects. So here, if I press F, is going to frame that selected object. If I press A, is going to select all of the objects. So F frames a single object, A frames everyone, or frames all basically. Is everyone okay up until now? That's all right. Yeah, that's all right. If you don't have a regular mouse, the only solution is you actually have to get a regular mouse at some point. In the meantime, these tools I'm showing you are here in the pane menu of the viewport. So not the top main menu, this one we call the pane menu. In the pane menu, you go to view, you go to camera tools, and these guys are here. Tumble, Track, Dolly, and there's so many other ones that we don't really need as much. So Tumble, Track, and Dolly are the three tools that we were just talking about. So if you want, you can actually stack this. You tear it and stack it, and you put it somewhere in the corner for yourself. When you want to tumble, you do that. When you want to track, you do that. When you want to do dolly, you do this. So basically the tools are here in the view, camera tools, and these three are those. All right. All right, so now I'm going to go back in here. Now we had one cube at least. That cube we managed to walk around it to see what's happening. The next thing that we want to learn about the scene navigation, which is actually quite important, is the mode of the viewport. This thing in here that you're looking through it, we call it a viewport. A viewport is a very, very important part of any 3D software. Basically, it is where you see your objects. In Maya, viewports and actually all the different views are focus smart, which means wherever your mouse button is, that is the active one. You don't need to click anywhere. Automatically it knows where your mouse is. For instance, when you're here, you can hit the space button and it will switch between the different angles of your object. And if you put your mouse back in there, you hit the space back, it just pushes back to where it used to be. So this basically maximizes the viewport or restores the viewport. And you can navigate between, say, perspective, top, front, or side, or whatever. Most everyone who has a bit of experience in Maya always works in this singular view. I haven't seen anyone who is a bit more experienced who works on all four views. They usually work on a single view, and if you want to see your model or whatever from different angles, you can hit the space button and keep it. And this is what we call the hotspot of Maya. The hotspot allows us to get access to all of the menus within this marking menu. So you hold the space button, but the most important of it is clicking in the middle and going up, down, right, or left, which basically switches to perspective, switches to the right view, switches to the top view, switches to the front view, and switches back to the perspective. So the other way of navigation is holding the space button and clicking in the middle and choosing the right marking menu. So I'm going to write in here, hold the space for the hotspot, and then from the hotspot, click middle. That's how you actually navigate fair there. So if I have, let's say, this object, again, don't worry about how am I duplicating. I'm making several objects. That part is irrelevant. I'm going to put them in here, push them a little bit in different directions. So we have a few different objects. So this is my perspective mode. I can do this to see everything from the front mode. I can do this to see everything from the top view. I can do this to see everything from the right view, or I can do this to go back to my perspective mode. And that is how you navigate your view for the most part. Questions up until now? If you want access to the multiple viewport, you just hit a space, it takes you back to here. Like I said, this isn't really a preferred way of doing it, so you just stay where you used to be, or you go to anyone, doesn't matter. And then you press the space and you hold it. That's gonna basically pop your hotspot window in here. And within the hotspot, or hotbox rather, within the hotbox, what you can do is you can just click in the middle, hold the button, and it shows you perspective, front, right, top, or whatever. So instead of having top in here, front in here, side in here, perspective in there, you hold the button, you get the hotbox, and then you go to perspective, front, right, or top. So this basically opens Hotbox. I wrote Hotspot by mistake. Hotbox. This is good so far. Just give it a second, try a few different combinations, and then, you know, we'll do one more thing after this. Sorry, what's the advantage of what? One more time. My line broke for a second. Well, theoretically, there really isn't anything to it. Like, this is dolly, and if you do this, it also dollies. So I can't really say if there is a particular advantage. It's just a matter of your personal preference. I've gotten used to using the right mouse, and then yeah, if you want, you can scroll as well. It does exactly the same thing. Okay, look up here, everyone. Let me explain this, even though it's really doesn't really matter as much, at least yet. But zoom is the feature of a camera where you actually change the lens. So this is a zoom, right? Again, you don't need to worry about how I do this. You just need to understand it, that this is a zoom that, if you pay attention, is changing the perspective. You're losing the perspective of this cube. It's becoming like a flat surface, right? A dolly is actually taking the camera and moving further or closer from it. So in the shape of a dolly, you basically move closer or you move further. When you're doing a zoom, is like changing the type of the lens that works like a telescope that can see further, but as it sees further, it loses perspective, just like how you do it in photography, basically. So for the most part, unless you're trying to get a very particular effect, you do dolly. Unless if you're trying to get a particular effect, then you sometimes use zoom. All right, we're good up until now. I wanted to show you guys. So far, so good. Great. Thank you for confirming. Every once in a while, if somebody just tells me that, you know, you are there with me, that would really be great. Now, so far we have seen some of the basics of the scene navigation. I want to show you two more hotkeys. These are really more advanced ones, if you would want to say. So these are the two bracket buttons that you can use them to do undo or redo. So these are not undo and redo of the scene. These are not like the undo that you have in Photoshop. These two, they basically undo what you have been doing with the scene navigation. Look, as I keep pressing the undo, it just goes back to whatever I've been doing with my navigation, not with the actual scene. The actual scene is the same regular thing as it is in the Control Z with any other software. So using these two basically undo or redos the scene, basically. So if you were in a very particular view, let's say here, and then, you know, in here, for instance, and then, you know, you lost that, you can press this button to go back there so you can see where we used to be. Again, these two are far less used, but I have had occasions that I needed to use them, so I thought, you know, you might want to learn those as well. Next thing is about the way that we see viewport. So this was the scene navigation. Now we want to see how does this viewport actually show us stuff. So this is viewport modes, basically. What do we want to see in the viewports mode? We have these buttons 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's also 6, 7, 8, but for now it doesn't really matter. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and Alt plus 5. I want you to try and tell me, you know, what do you understand of them, and I want someone to try to explain it to us. Anyone made sense of it? Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, that's similar. Mm-hmm. Okay. Very good. Good. So one, two, three, there are the levels of a smoothness of a model. So if we have this model, bear with me. Again, don't worry about how am I doing any of these things. You will get to see them really, really soon. I just want to show you, give you a bit of a demonstration as to what do they actually do. So if we have a model like this one, right? Let me make that like that. And if I press 3 on it, it shows me the smooth version of it, which is actually very nice and very cool. If I'm going to 1, it shows me the sharp version of it, which is the actual version of the model. If I press 2, I get a combination of the two. So I can see where my faces or my vertices or whatever are, and also I can actually get to see where my object, my object would look like in the smooth version. Usually you end up rendering this for the final version. You want to have a very smooth version of your objects, but as you're working on it, you prefer to work on a version like this, which is a non-smooth version that's going to make our lives easier in terms of understanding what we are working on it. So 1, 2, 3 are the 3 different ways of making an object smooth or not. So that's the very first one. Then we had 4 and 5. 4 is this, which basically shows you the wireframes without the shading. 5 is this, the default mode, the mode that shows us the wires as well. And finally, we have Alt and 5, which basically shows us the wires over the shaded mode. If you're wondering, they're all here. Wireframe, a smooth shade, and wireframe unshaded. There's so many other modes in here, flat shaded, X-ray, X-ray joint, whatever. Whenever we need one of them, I will explain what's happening with them. But for now, we just need these 6 different combinations, 1, 2, 3, 4, and Alt 5 or Option 5 if you're using a Mac like I'm doing. This made sense up until now? You should have an object selected. If nothing is selected, they don't really work. Maybe I should have mentioned, yeah, 1, 2, 3 on selection. All right, so far we got through scene navigation, we got through viewport mode, and now the next thing, did someone want to ask a question? I heard someone's microphone to come in. Yes, I am recording the screen, so I will share this recording with you guys. At the end, once these notes are done, I'm gonna make it full screen when we have everything together, and you can either take a picture of it yourself or you can just make some notes or whatever. I find it that at the end, once everything is ready, if you just take one screenshot, that would be the easiest solution. And that's what we did for the previous group as well. All right, so now we have these guys taken care of. We had the scene navigation, we got through it, we got through the viewport mode. Now we want to learn, so what can we do with these single objects? How can I actually manipulate them or put them in different places? So let's see the keywords for those or the hotkeys for those. And the reason I go through the hotkeys for showing you the tools, because these tools, you really cannot use them without the hotkeys. There's obviously tons of tools that we use from the menus, and I don't really know what's the hotkey for this one, even if there is one. But some stuff you absolutely need to use the shortcuts for them, otherwise you're really not working. So the next series are for transformations. And for the transformations, we use this. So I want you to try these and someone explain to us what did they actually do and how can we use them. Don't worry about T and Y. Those are the ones that we will see in the future. But these top ones, we want to see how they work. Q, W, E, R, T, Y, QWERTY, as we call them in the industry. So what... Really? Okay. So select and scale. So let's see all of these things. If I'm on the Q, I can select. If I'm on the W, I can select and move. If I'm on the E, I can select and rotate. If I'm on the R, I can select and scale. Pay attention to here. I know you can't see my mouse pointer, but they are here on the top left corner of your Maya. On the top left corner of your Maya, you will see that as I press Q, W, E, R, T, the tools, they change in here. One more time, Q, W, E, R, they are here. So this is selection, this is translation, this is rotation, and this is a scale. So Q, W, E, R, QWERTY, or the T and Y, we'll get to it in the future. Q, W, E, R, the first four, they are the selection, selection and translate, selection and rotation, and selection and scale. So far we are good. Everyone is up to here. Should I take that as a yes or a no? Good. Now, I want to ask you guys a question. How many of you paid attention to this little guy at the lower left corner of the screen? There is, where I put this cube, the reason I'm putting the cube is because we don't have the pointer in here, right? So where my cube is now, there are three axes, one green, one blue, one red. What are those? Does anyone know? On the lower left, right next to Maya's icon. All right, so these three are basically the three axes of your scene. If you're working on an Adobe Photoshop file, you have two axes. You have horizontal and vertical. Horizontal is mapped to X, vertical is mapped to Y. If you're working in a 3D environment, that obviously has another one, which is the Z axis. So X, Y, Z, or Z, whichever you want to say, they basically are mapped to your three axes. And they're also color coded. So X is basically red, so basically red, green, blue. RGB, they map to X, Y, and Z. So those are the three of those axes that we see for the scene and for each object. Now, why do I bring this up? Because as you can see, when you make another object, let's say create polygon, I want to make a sphere, I press F. From what we remember in here, I'm going to frame it by pressing F. I go right there. Then I'm going to press W to move it. So W. In here, I can move it only on the X, or I can move it only on the Y, or I can move it only on the Z axis. Does that make sense? How we can use each single axis individually or separately? So that's not unique to movement. You can do the same thing for rotation. So if I go to rotation, I can actually rotate on this axis only, or on the X axis only, or on the other axis. Maybe the sphere is not very clear. I can actually show it to you on a box. So here, when I'm rotating, I can rotate on one of the axes only, or the other one only. And the same thing applies to a scale. I can scale them on only one of them, which makes them non-proportional scale. This is basically like a squeezing or squishing the object. That is, this is a proportional scale. All of them, they scale together. This is a non-proportional scale. So far we are good. Everybody is up to here with me. Good. I want to show you a few more things and then we're kind of done. We're going to spend the rest of our time working on your very first assignment. So the next thing is this. I want to make myself an object such as this one. Let's say I don't have that. I'm actually going to make a new scene. Command N makes a new scene, or file new scene. And if you're wondering, a scene is a file of Maya. Just like how a PSD is a file of Photoshop and a .ai is a file of Adobe Illustrator, a scene is a file of Maya. Like a Word document, we call it a scene document. A scene is a Maya file. So I'm going to make a scene in here, and this scene, I'm going to go ahead and make a cube in it. This cube, I'm going to make it larger. I'm going to make it like that. I'm going to make it like this. Then what I'm going to be doing next is this. I'm going to actually duplicate this. Don't worry about how am I duplicating. I will get to that in a second. I want to put it in here. I want to hit Alt and 5 because I want to see the wireframes. I want to push the other one in here. Very good, exactly like what I wanted. I want to actually duplicate this one more time and I want to put it on the top of it. Again, don't worry about any of this. I want to ask you guys a question that's going to explore our next topic. So I have this guy, which is basically like a little, door. So in here, if I make one more of these and I scale it up and I make it like that, imagine this is like a little platform, and on the platform I have a little door that can be opened, right? So if I select this door, the middle, and I rotate it, how is it going to rotate? Do most doors rotate from around their middle? So why is that, and how can we fix this? Yes, so now we want to talk about a very important topic called a pivot. A pivot is where your transformations, they get applied to. Let's go ahead into here and I say I have a cube, and this cube is in here, and then when I grab it and I move this center to here, what happens? It says, well, the center is moving to there, everyone else should move that much to the right. So the transformation is applied to this center. When I rotate it, it says the center is rotated like that, so everyone based on that center gets rotated that much. The same thing to do with the scale. It says you're scaling it from the center, so from the middle is going to start getting a larger or a smaller depending on what you're doing. So this placement of this guy in the middle, which we call a manipulator or a gizmo, the place of this manipulator is basically the pivot of your object. Where the pivot is where the transformations, all of these guys, they get applied to. So it stands to reason that we should be able to change that. For instance, I could go ahead, hold the D button and move my pivot to somewhere else. So I'm going to write this down. This is the discussion of the pivots. So D, and I'm going to say hold D, move pivot, right? So here's what we do. I'm going to hold the D button, I'm going to move this guy to here, and look what happens now. Now the scale happens against there, not against the center of my object. Or when I try to rotate it, it happens against that place. So let's go ahead and see our door situation. Here, we had the door situation, and the rotation is happening against the middle. I don't really like that. What I could do is I could actually hold the D button and move this to a corner, to about there. And now when I rotate, it actually rotates correctly from where I was hoping it would rotate. Does this make sense to everyone? Can you all give it a shot, try, make sure you understand? If you don't, you have to let me know. And please don't be shy of saying, hey, I didn't get it, because, well, that's what we are here for. Oh, there would be a lot of reasons for rotating a pivot point. Let me show you. We're not going to get into that because it's a bit of a complex situation, but I will explain to you why we would want to do that. let's say you have an object like this, right? And you have rotated it like this, right? Now look at the pivot. What if I want to rotate against the center of it and along the longer axis? How should I do that? That's where it becomes important to rotate a pivot point and align the pivot point with a different direction. So right now, if I want to rotate this object along the longer axis of it, it doesn't work. You see, even if I try really carefully, I mess it up. Of course, for this one, because it's a primitive object, there are solutions such as doing it this way. But for objects that are not primitive, there really isn't a solution like that. For those, we have to rotate our pivots and rearrange our pivots. Pivots are a very, very complex topic, and I don't want to get into a technical discussion of it simply because I feel like it's way ahead of us. But pivots, they also have an order between them. Some pivots, they carry the other ones, such as, you know, in this case, the z-axis, y-axis is carrying x and z, and then this one is carrying only the y one. And I will get to this maybe at some point in the future. Just so you know, pivots, the use of them is relatively easy, but they're actually a more complex topic. And from a programming perspective, they're actually a very, very complex topic to write a pivot system. Are we good up until now? I didn't. I don't want to go through that just yet, you know. Yeah, we don't. All right, so we just moved the pivot to go from one direction to the other one. So we held the D button and we moved it. So that's the first thing we wanted to make sure that we understand how it works. Then sometimes when you move your pivot, you do something for whatever reason, you want to put your pivot back to the center of your object. Keep in mind, the center of your object doesn't mean where the pivot used to be. It means the current center of it. And to do that, you go to Modify Center Pivot. Or if you want it, we could assign a shortcut to it. For me, the shortcut for this is the Home button, which I felt it makes a lot of sense. But if you want to push your pivot back to where it used to be, you hit the Modify Center Pivot. This is good. Everybody could try it and made sense to everyone. Guys, I don't want you to try this, but for those of you whoever was interested, you go to Windows Setting Preferences, Hotkey Editor, and I leave it to you to figure it out from there on. It's very simple. So yeah, exactly. How did I move the door like that? So how is yours right now? When you rotate it, it becomes like this. Here, I hold the D button and then I move it like that. And then I let go, and now I have a new pivot. And then I can rotate based on that. So if I want to change the pivot, I hold the D button. I am now in the pivot editing mode. I'm going to push it to here. Now that's taken care of. I let go of D and I let go of my mouse button. I have a new pivot, and then I rotate it whichever way I want, which obviously this doesn't really make much sense, but still. Yes, once I am done, yes, absolutely. Once I am done with the pivot editing, I let go of them. So I'm happy about this here for whatever reason. I let go of it, and now I'm back into whatever I used to be. I can now rotate, I can now scale, I can do whatever I wanted to do. All right, of course. Let me show you another one. I will show you all another example soon. All right, because I want to show you a few more things that's going to make this process a lot easier. Just bear with me for a few seconds. Okay, now after changing the pivot and everything, you want to learn another combination of keys. So here we also learned the modify.center pivot. So remember that. Now, the next thing is this. I want to go ahead and I want to try these buttons, X, C, and V. Try to see if you can figure out what do they do. Anyone? Very good. These are like our snapping tools in Maya. Let me show you in a new scene. This is my new scene. In my new scene, this thing at the bottom is called the grid. The grid is like the grid of Photoshop or the guides of Photoshop and Adobe Illustrator. So it basically shows you a grid, and you can modify this if you don't like it. You can go to display grid, press this little option box and make changes to make it different, make it larger or smaller or whatever. The point is this. If I have an object, let's say I have this cube and it is there, right? I can hold the X button and I can actually snap it to the points on this grid. So I can't leave it somewhere random. I can only place it on where the grid is and where the grid has one of its intersections. That's one type of a snap. So X is a snap to grid. Then we have C, which is like this. Let's say I have another object, another cube maybe. This other cube, I'm going to make it larger. So like that. I'm going to go ahead and say hold the C button, and I'm going to now snap it to the curves, to the edges of my basically of my bigger cube. So that's a snap to the curve. And then every corner of an object is called a vertex. So holding the V allows me to snap to these corners or a snap to vertices. So this one is called snap to curve, and this is a snap to vertices. That good? That makes sense? Everybody is following along? Okay, guys, I want to show you something now, and I really want all of you not to be doing anything and just look at what I'm doing. One of you guys has this microphone on. Do you mind if you mute it for a second, because there's a lot of noise in the background? All right, thank you. So look up here. I want to explain something. Please don't try to catch up with me. Then I will, give you time to do whatever you're doing, right? This is an object, a cube, right? What happens if I click somewhere outside? It gets deselected, right? So if I go here, I click, it gets deselected. If I'm in the move tool, I click, it gets deselected. Whatever I try outside it, it gets deselected. Now, in Maya, most everything doesn't work with the left mouse button. Most everything works with the middle mouse button. So what do we do with the middle mouse button? So if I'm selecting this guy, even if I'm clicking somewhere else, like an empty space, I can still move that object. So I'm clicking somewhere outside my object and I can still move it, right? So I'm again clicking in here. I know you can't see my pointer, but I'm clicking somewhere on the right side of my viewport where everything is empty. I'm moving it and it's actually moving my object. That's one thing I could do in here. So let me write this down. Middle mouse drag, I'm gonna write it on empty area, right? So this is gonna move my object, for instance. What else I could do? I could potentially hold the shift button. Let's see, I'm in a situation like this one. My object is on the left, my mouse pointer is on the right side of the screen, right? I'm gonna hold the shift button. When I'm holding the shift button, I'm gonna drag upwards. It's gonna select that particular axis and it's gonna move my object only on that axis, on the Y axis. Look, I can't move to the sides or back. I can only go up and down. Again, I'm going to hold the shift button and I'm going to go left to right, somewhere on the empty, using the middle mouse drag, not the left mouse drag. So again, I can move it in that direction. Same thing if I move it in towards my screen. So middle mouse drag on empty does a lot of really cool stuff for us. Now, let me show you another thing that it does. Let's say I have this cube. And I want to grab this object, the smaller one, and I want to put it on the corner, on the top left corner of it, basically this corner. So I want to select this object and I want to move to this corner. Let's see how we're going to be doing that. I'm going to select this object, the smaller one. I'm going to hold the V button, that is for vertices. And then I know you can't see my mouse pointer, but I'm moving my mouse pointer over the top left corner of the big square or big cube, and I'm middle mouse clicking. Middle mouse click, not the left mouse click. Keep in mind, if I do a left mouse click, I lose the selection. The selection just goes away. But when I select it and I do a middle mouse click, it automatically attaches it to there, which is a very powerful way of moving objects around in Maya. So middle mouse on empty, you can use a combination of shift, or you can use for instance, the snap tools. So you can use a combination of all of these things, and that makes very, very powerful combination of manipulation. Can we try this? Can we make sure this makes sense to everyone? It's really crickets in here. Is everyone following, or how's it going? Yes, absolutely. I select the object that I want to do stuff with it, then I do everything with the middle mouse drag. Absolutely, is without having to select the manipulator. Just as a rule of thumb, get used to doing everything with the middle mouse drag. So if you want to move something, like right now, if I'm to move something, my finger automatically goes on the middle mouse. I never click the actual object. I always click that and then I move. Wherever I am, I do the same thing. I never actually select an object and go directly select that middle yellow icon. I just click something and I middle mouse drag to whatever I'm trying to do, because that really speeds you up, because it means you don't have to take your mouse, go exactly over there, find the icon, click on it and drag it. That's going to be really, really difficult. Not to the best of my knowledge, no. I can't tell you if I know any way for that. You kind of, yeah. What kind of mouse do you have? You have a Magic Mouse, the Mac mouse? Yeah, that's a Magic Mouse. Let me see if the Magic Mouse actually does that, because I do have a Magic Mouse in here. Let me see. Not that, not that. I know there is a way to simulate the middle mouse, but I can't figure it out on a Magic Mouse. Usually, even though I'm a big fan and a biased fan of Mac stuff, for Maya, it's very difficult to use Magic Mouse. So you kind of need to get yourself. There are mice in the market for like $5. They would do the trick for you, just not the Magic Mouse. All right. Any other questions up until now? Good. We want to see, and let me write this down, the snap tools. So those are the snap tools, and this is the middle mouse functions. So, and that's that. And finally, I want you guys to try this tool, Edit Duplicate with Transform, which the shortcut for it should be Shift and D. So Shift plus D, tell me what it does. Is this something you just figured out or you have seen it before? Okay, so that's perfectly correct. Others, can you reach the same conclusion? All right, look up here, everyone. I'm gonna do something like this. I'm gonna make myself a, let's say I wanna make an object like this one. All right, again, don't try to catch up with me, just bear with me. On the right side in my channel box, I can see the translation, XYZ, rotation, XYZ, and a scale XYZ. Just like how I change the values in here, they automatically get applied over there. So I'm gonna put all of these to be 10. You know, it doesn't really matter what number you choose. I'm gonna actually scale it a little bit more on one of the directions, let's say 60. Now, I want to actually put the pivot of this object to be this corner on the lower left side of it. So I want the pivot of the entire object to be here. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say, let's hold the D button. And then while I hold the D button, I'm also going to hold the V button. Why am I doing that? I hold the D for moving the pivot, and I'm holding the V for snapping to the vertices. So again, I'm going to hold the D button, and I'm going to hold the V button, and I'm going to grab this guy, put it right here in the lower left corner. So now the pivot of my object is there. So I've managed to move the pivot exactly where I wanted it to be. Then I'm going to do this. I'm going to say, let's duplicate this object, put it there. All right, it makes a copy, obviously. That's by hitting Control D. But let's do this one. Let's do a Shift and D. So I'm going to say Shift and D. It says, let's duplicate and also remember the transform. So I'm going to duplicate and make a transform, such as moving it forward, and Maya is remembering this. So the next time I press Shift and D, it does this. It repeats the same transformation. It just keeps pushing them in the same direction. Now let's see something a little bit more meaningful. I'm going to select this guy. I'm going to say Shift and D. I want you to remember the transformation. He says, okay, so tell me what's the transformation. I'm going to say transformation is this. Let's move you in here, let's say like that, and rotate you a little bit, maybe this much. Let's move it back a little bit further and rotate it a little bit less, maybe instead of -15, -8 or -10 degrees, something like that. He says, okay, I remember the transformation you made. I'm going to say now, keep duplicating. So it's going to keep doing the same thing every time I make a duplicate. So I'm making some sort of a spiral, a staircase basically. So every time I press the Shift and D, what it does is it makes a copy and it remembers what I just did a second ago and applies that transformation to your object. Does this make sense? Duplicate, apply previous transformation, right? Any questions? We got a little bit more than what I was hoping. I was hoping to wrap it up by about 1:30, but I feel like, you know, we needed to go through all of these. So this is pretty much it for the first lesson. We're going to spend the remainder of today working on your assignment 1. What you want to be doing is you want to head into your Canvas. You want to get to see what's the assignment 1. Get started with it. If you have any questions, ask me. These are all the tools that we went through today. So I'm going to put them side by side like this. Let me actually put one in here, a little bit larger, and then another one in here also a little bit larger, and let me get rid of Maya so things are cleaner in here. So if you want to take a snapshot at this point, that would be a good idea. Maybe I make things a little bit larger. Let me move one of them in here so the sizes, they become comparable. So like this, basically, if you want to take a snapshot up until now. So these are everything that we went through today. How we navigate the scene using a combination of Alt or Option button and left mouse drag, right mouse drag, and middle mouse drag. How we use F and A to frame an object or frame all objects. How we use hold the space box to get the hot box. How we use the two brackets to basically undo or redo the scene. We looked at the viewport mode, such as 1, 2, 3 on a selection that changes the smoothness. So that's another thing that we saw. Or how we use the 4, 5 and Alt and 5 to change the shading mode. So we saw these things. We duplicated using Shift and D to remember the duplicate transformation. We did transformation with QWERTY, QWER, T and Y that we'll see in the future, but QWER, which are select, translate, rotate, and scale. We changed pivots by holding the D button or going to center pivot to pushing it back to where it used to be. And then we also saw how we can use snapping using the X, C, and V, as well as using the middle mouse functions by clicking on an empty area of our scene. So that's pretty much it for in terms of what I wanted to cover in the first session. I'm gonna stop the recording of the video in here because I feel like that would be sufficient for what you guys are doing. But if you have any questions, I'm here. You know, we're gonna spend the next 20-25 minutes working on your assignment, and hopefully you can manage to wrap it up or at least get started with it right now.